Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Unbanned Coolies. I have the distinct honor of hosting a remarkable individual whose unwavering dedication to intellectual freedom has left an indelible mark on the world of education. She is a high school librarian hailing from Annandale, New Jersey. She's not just any librarian. She's a beacon of courage and resilience in the face of adversity. Her journey has been defined by her unyielding commitment to safeguarding the right to read, especially when that right came under threat in her own high school library. In recognition of her advocacy, she was awarded the Intellectual Freedom Award by the American Association of School Librarians. In 2022, she was the recipient of the Outstanding Librarian Award from the National Coalition Against Censorship. These accolades speak volumes about her dedication and the profound impact she has on her community. Today, I have the privilege of delving into her experiences, insights, and the lessons she's learned from her mission to protect the freedom to read. Please welcome to Unbanned Coolies, Martha Hickson.
Hi, Christopher. Wow, that introduction. Gee, can I get it for my tombstone? But not too soon.
I'm truly honored to spend time with you. I'd like to start by sharing a book called Dragon Wings by Lawrence Yep. The character of Moonshadow, a young Chinese-American boy, experiences a profound connection to his Chinese heritage through his father, Wind Rider. The story beautifully portrays the father and son relationship. The connection to his culture made me proud of my own Asian heritage. Martha, is there a book that had a similar connection to you as a kid?
Yeah, when I think back on the books I read as a kid, and I read a lot as a kid, as you might imagine, me being a librarian and all, but the one that sticks out the most is Harriet the Spy by Louise Fitzhugh. And I read it over and over and over again. I used to pretend to be Harriet the Spy, play outside as Harriet the Spy. And I think what got to me about that book is I'm the oldest of 5 children. The other 4 are all boys. So, and maybe it was true when you were a kid too. Being the only girl among all those boys, I wasn't really included in their activities. So I had to find things to do on my own, and I'm quite content with that. And that's pretty much the way Harriet was in that book too. She was also really smart, very funny, and she was really independent, bebopping around New York City by herself. And I think I admired those qualities and eventually came to embody some of them. So I could really see myself or see the kind of person I wanted to be in Harriet.
It's important to note that Dragon Wings have won many awards, including the Newbery. Dragon Wings have recently faced bans and challenges, which brings me to ask you about banned books. Martha, you went through a challenging experience when a small group attempted to ban books related to the LGBTQ community from your library. Can you share more about how you initially reacted to the situation?
I certainly will. And I would like to mention regarding Harriet the Spy, that has received its own challenges, specifically because Harriet doesn't behave like a traditional girl, that sort of doesn't observe traditional gender stereotypes. In the situation that I faced, the most recent one, in September of 2021, there were 5 books in my high school library that were challenged, all with LGBTQ plus themes. And when this landed on my doorstep, my reaction was one of shock. I was watching it happen live at the board meeting. I was watching live stream from home because my principal had given me a heads up earlier in the day that he thought there might be a complaint about a book at the board meeting. And he thought the one book was going to be genderqueer. As it actually played out, yes, genderqueer was objected to at that board meeting, along with the book Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison. In addition, this happened on September 28th, 2021. That happened to be Banned Books Week. The protesters complained about Banned Books Week during Banned Books Week. And then they also complained about me for making these books available. And they labeled me by name at a board meeting. This has since been viewed more than 5,000 times. A pornographer, pedophile, and groomer of children. And as I sat there at home watching these words come to be associated with my name, the reaction was outright shock, which was quickly followed by some intense emotion, tears. I had physical reactions. My heart was beating out of my chest. My stomach was churning. But even with all of that turmoil, physical, mental, emotional turmoil going on, I knew that I had to take steps immediately. So even as that board meeting was continuing, I had my cell phone, just as I do now, and I started reaching out for help to the ALA, American Library Association Office for Intellectual Freedom, the National Coalition Against Censorship, the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, everylibrary.org, which is a political action committee for libraries. My union president, I'm fortunate to work in a state where teachers can belong to a union. My colleagues throughout New Jersey, through the New Jersey Association of School Librarians, and then to a group of community members that I had helped form 2 years prior, when there was an earlier censorship attempt in my library. And that's a group that calls itself the North Hundred and Voorhees, that's the name of my school district, Intellectual Freedom Fighters. So even as I was going through it, I was like, okay, I can't wallow in this. I gotta make a plan. And I started planning that night.
As I was scouring the internet trying to learn as much as I could about you, I found a wonderful, profound article on CNN that helped me understand the enormous stress and difficulties you've endured during that trying period, and the weight of the burden you carried, and the emotional toll you must have taken. And for our audience, I'll put the link to the CNN article in the description. I've read that you received hate mail, and there was vandalism in your library. How did you cope with the emotional toll of these incidents?
Well, when it first started, that night on September 28th, I knew I had to go back to work the next day, and I'm what you'd call maybe like a type A worker bee personality. I just keep my nose to the grindstone and get the work done. So initially that was my approach. Just put on the blinders and just focused on my work, getting the work done. But it turned out that almost every day there was some new bombshell landing in my lap in the form of hate mail, as you indicated, vandalism in the library, antagonism from my administration, who were not supportive during all of this. And it was day after day after day. And I no longer felt like my workplace was a safe space for me. I work hard to make that library a safe and welcoming space for the kids. And I'm proud that it is, but it no longer felt safe and welcoming to me. And after about a month of this, there came a day, when I would say my resilience, my resources wore thin, and I had what I now understand was a stress-induced breakdown at work. My husband had to come and pick me up. He took me to my primary care doctor, who recognized immediately that something was amiss. And she put me on medication to help me with anxiety. She referred me to a therapist to help me process all of this. And she took me out of work for several weeks to remove me from the stimulus. And eventually, with those interventions, I was able to get back in the game.
Wow, that's insane.
I agree.
Yeah. What steps did you take to advocate for the right to read and protect these banned books?
Well, the first steps I took occurred, decades before. At least one of these books, remember we're talking about 2021, at least one of these books had been on the shelves in the library since 2006. So the steps I took occurred long before the challenges. And the first one was following the proper procedures for procuring the library books. Library books, I don't just go on a shopping spree, nor does any librarian. We have collection development policies, and we have selection policies and guidelines that we have to follow. So when these complaints came up, I didn't take them too seriously and didn't worry too long and hard about whether the books were going to be removed, because I knew that I had acquired them through the appropriate means, methods, and that they met the selection guidelines for our library. So that's the first step. And the other important precursor is that I am a graduate of an ALA approved library school with a master's degree in library and information science. And part of our training is about the First Amendment and the right to read. So I had those things as a solid foundation. In the moment, though, as I indicated, and part of my training and experience is when this happens, you need to report it. So that is why immediately I reported these challenges to the ALA and the National Coalition Against Censorship and the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund and so on. Once I had taken care of that, then I started looking ahead to what are the next steps going to be. And typically in a situation like this, the next step is the school district will form a reconsideration committee that is tasked with actually reading the books and making a recommendation to the board about whether the book should stay or go. Well, I didn't want that reconsideration committee just kind of going in blind. So I began compiling background documents that I call resumes for each of the books. And those resumes included the very same book reviews that I read when I made the decision to purchase these books, plus others. So they had the book reviews, the professional book reviews, to show them what was what. A list of the awards that these books had won, and they had won some tremendous awards. The best of lists that they appeared on. Some of the references from selection guides like EBSCO's core collection. And any previous challenges and the outcomes for them. So they had this nice little resume for each book. I also, while all this was going on, was keeping an eye on what's happening out in the world, specifically other places where these books were being challenged. The strange thing is, these challenges in September of 2021 were very early in this current national wave of censorship. We were among the first schools to experience this. And as soon as the shock wore off, I started looking into, gosh, Genderqueer and Lawn Boy, that's a really odd pair of books to object to. And I quickly discovered that in the 2 weeks prior to our challenges, the same pair of books had been objected to in Texas and Virginia, using the same talking points. So I recognized immediately that this was not an organic challenge, shall we say, originating out of a sincere concern, but it seemed to be something more coordinated. And one of those communities where the challenges took place very shortly before mine was Fairfax, Virginia. And I think it was around mid-November, they resolved their reconsideration and in favor of retaining both books. So I looked up their reconsideration report. It was online, and I made sure to provide that to our administrators as well, because there's one thing I know about school administrators that you might not know, Christopher. They hate taking risks. They hate to be the first to do something. So I knew if my administration, my decision makers could see that another school district in a very similar demographic area to ours had said, yeah, these books are fine, it would give them the courage to do the same thing. Also, while I was doing all this, I was organizing the community. And by that, I mean reaching out to students in my building and in the other school in our school district, the other high school. As I mentioned, reaching out to my union who helped get staff members to support me, reaching out to parents whom I knew and community members whom I knew so that we could all get together to fight back, which we did. So that by the time of the October board meeting, there was a huge crowd of people there, somewhere on the order of 400 who were there to support the books versus roughly 30 people who were on the book banning boat. And the important thing is we kept showing up month after month after month until this was finally resolved in January of 22.
You emphasize the importance of reporting challenges to books and seeking support from various organizations and individuals. Could you elaborate on how this collective effort can make a difference in defending intellectual freedom?
Sure. I really want to stress, especially for your viewers and listeners, who some of whom I imagine are in your same stage of life, the criticality of involving students. they were just tremendous in this effort. But the reporting piece of it is so essential, because if you are operating in isolation, it's hard to get that help. And the established organizations that I mentioned, like ALA and National Coalition Against Censorship, PEN America is terrific as well. They have vast experience with this. Hopefully, for most librarians, this is a once-in-a-lifetime drama. But these organizations have vast experience. And when you report to them, it helps them identify titles, authors, reader populations who are at risk. As in this current wave, the titles tend to focus on LGBTQ plus and BIPOC themes. Without that consistent reporting from all of us on the front lines, these organizations wouldn't be aware of that pattern. And speaking of patterns, your reporting also helps reveal the fact that this activity is organized. Just as I discovered with my own little, in the moment detective work having to do with Texas and Virginia, these national organizations can see that on a much bigger scale and say, oh, wait a second, we're seeing the same, 10 books coming up over and over and over again across the country. And then that confirms, the gut feeling that I had. Reporting is critical. It provides a service to the library and reader community, but it also provides a service and protection to you as the frontline person, because those organizations will come to your assistance.
You mentioned the vital role that students played in defending the books in your library. Can you tell us more about the impact they had on the outcome of the situation?
Oh, I am proud to tell you. I'm so awestruck and forever grateful to my students in this situation. The reason that they are so vital is it's because their rights are the ones that are being abridged in this situation. And when kids stand up in front of a board of education and come up to the microphone, even if they're scared and nervous, and sometimes the scared and nervous actually helps because it shows how committed they are. It's impossible for a board of education to ignore them. I mean, what is a board of education there to do? Who are they there to serve? It's the students. So when the students show up at a board meeting, and believe me, they're boring, those board meetings. Could be home, watching Netflix, playing a video game, but no, you showed up at a board meeting, they pay attention. And the kids in my district came month after month and kept speaking. And they did so with poise and intelligence and conviction, and showed that they cared. And it's fantastic. And it made a huge difference. And the thing that was really courageous about these kids is when they were at the microphone, the book banners, who were very poorly behaved in general, just the fact that they're banning a book is poor behavior, but then the way they comported themselves at the board meetings was incorrect. And they were jeering at these students. So it just shows you the caliber of people that we're dealing with. And the great thing about the kids, some of them have continued their activism beyond this event. One of our students, Max Moore, is now a student ambassador for the National Coalition Against Censorship. And in fact, just this week was a panelist for the ALA on a youth forum that they held for Banned Books Week. And Max did a tremendous job on that panel. And then another of the students who was very actively involved in the book ban, Jude Jepp, now serves as a student representative on our Board of Education. So this experience sort of helped give them new experiences in leadership and activism, which is terrific.
As a librarian, what advice would you give to other educators who might face similar challenges with book banning in their schools and communities?
Yeah, sadly, that event is fairly likely these days. And I end up giving this event advice quite often because librarians and teachers from all over the country have gotten in touch with me over the last 2 years. And the advice I typically give is, number one, stay aware. Remember how I said that the genderqueer and lawn boy had been objected to in the couple of weeks before it happened in my district? Normally, there are publications that I read pretty religiously. Book Riot is one. Uh, the American Library Association Office for Intellectual Freedom has a blog that comes out every Friday where they summarize book banning news. But this was September. I was busy. I wasn't paying attention. So number one, pay attention to what's going on so that you're aware of the titles and authors that are coming under scrutiny. And tools that can be helpful in that regard, you can set up a Google alert, for book banning, or because I'm a librarian and maybe you know how to do this too, Christopher, if you use your electronic databases, most of those will let you do a search alert. So you sort of have a research robot and the results come into my inbox every Monday. I set mine up in ProQuest. So stay aware. I mentioned earlier policies. You have to know what your district's policies are regarding things like book selection, reconsideration policies when books are challenged, and even the way board meetings are supposed to be conducted. Because what happened at that board meeting regarding my name was inappropriate according to board policies. And then you have to insist that your administrators follow those policies and your board follow those policies. Every time there's been a problem with a book in the 19 years that I've been a librarian, and really, despite the last 2 years, those problems have been fairly few. Every administrator I ever dealt with had no idea that there was a policy around book challenges. I've had to educate them every time. So knowing the policies is essential. And if this happened to me again, one of the things I would have insisted on the next day, I should have marched myself down to the principal's office and insisted on an investigation to clear my name. If you're going to call Martha Hickson a pornographer, pedophile, and groomer of children, you better be prepared to prove it. And if you can't, I want that retracted immediately. Lesson learned. I didn't do that. I wish I had. And I think, as I've implied already, you can't do this alone. Your resources, your personal resources will wear out. There are people who have more expertise on this than you. There is strength in numbers. So get help and don't be ashamed to do it. And then you need to take care of yourself. It's just like that thing on the airplane where they say, in the event of emergency, apply your oxygen mask before you help somebody else. Same deal here. You're not going to be able to continue the fight if your physical and mental resources wear down. So figure out, who are the people that give you life? What are the activities that give you life, and pursue them?
It's truly heartwarming to learn about your receipt of the Intellectual Freedom Award. Can you share some of your emotions and thoughts when witnessing the next generation of intellectual freedom advocates stepping forward and making a stand?
I sure can, because it's been the proudest aspect of my library career. So in January of 2022, all 5 books were retained. The Board of Education said, no problem, we're keeping them. And then 6 months later, in June of 2022, the Gender and Sexuality Alliances for the 2 high schools in my district received from the New Jersey Library Association its Intellectual Freedom Award for their role in protecting those books and defending them from censorship. The kids were invited down to Atlantic City to the NJLA's conference, and I think they were the last award of the night. And when that award was announced, packed ballroom of librarians, those kids took the stage to a standing ovation from this room full of librarians and cheers. And I tell you, every time I tell this story, I get kind of choked up because sincerely, it was one of the proudest nights of my life. And the kids were so excited, but to see them celebrated in that way, and they were treated like rock stars at the conference, and they truly deserved it because they took a huge, huge risk. And on top of that, they were using the skills that they had learned throughout their education. They were using reading, writing, public speaking, project management skills to fight this battle, and it was recognized for its excellence. And they were doing it for the public good. It's everything you want education to be. And I got to see it go from inception to completion to recognition. And my heart swelled with pride, and I don't think it's come back down to size yet. I just loved seeing that happen. And the best thing for me is, can you tell, Christopher, I'm old? Let me get really close. There's wrinkles. I'm old. I can see her retirement.
I mean, you don't look that old. You don't look that
old. I'm old. Harriet the Spy was my favorite book. Look it up. Um, uh, Retirement is on the horizon. And long after I'm gone, either from this job or this planet, I know that there's a generation of students through this experience who will be able to keep fighting for the right to read. And that's just a wonderful feeling.
I just wanted to say that your resilience and unwavering commitment to the right to read, even in the face of adversity, is truly inspiring. Before we end this interview, is there anything you'd like to share?
Yes, there is. Today, as we record this, it's October 9th. Is that right? No, 8th. October 8th?
Yeah, 8th.
It's early October of 2023. And we just are coming to the end of Banned Books Week. Yesterday was Let Freedom Read Day, where people were encouraged to take action to protect the right to read. And that's wonderful that we had a day and we had a week. But as we've seen over the last 2 years, book challenges can happen at any time. And it seems that these days they're happening all the time. We don't need a special day. We don't need a special week to protect the right to read. And there are things that everyone can do in their daily life to help with that. You can request from your bookstore or library that they carry some of these banned titles at your school or public library, especially those that are dealing with marginalized populations. Your attendance at those things matters. You can write to your library to thank them for those books and programs. I'll tell you, as I was going through this over the last 2 years, I got lots of cards and letters from former students who thanked me for the inclusivity of our library. And I got lots of cards and letters from total strangers too. And each one of those was meaningful. So thank a librarian. And one thing that everybody can do, it takes no time at all, is join uniteagainstbookbans.org. I'm going to say that again, uniteagainstbookbans.org. It's a coalition that includes the American Library Association and some of the wonderful organizations I mentioned earlier, like National Coalition Against Censorship and PEN America. And there are a ton of resources there for everybody about what you can do. And this is so important because it's more than just books that are at stake, although that's important enough, but it's representation that's at stake, and it's the lives of the people represented in these books that are at stake. And so too is our democracy. Really important.
Martha, you have provided a safe space for teens like me to learn, grow, and understand their own identities. Your strength serves as a beacon of hope and courage for librarians, educators, and advocates everywhere. Thank you for being a guiding light for all of us.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.